For more than a decade, Meek Mill has constantly stayed under the fear of going to prison any time. All this for some petty drug peddling during his teens. He was entangled in many legal battles when he started releasing his mixtapes. Once his music got attention, so did his case. Even today, his past is the reason why he doesn't get lucrative brand deals like many of his contemporaries. Keep watching to find out why a high-profile celebrity like Jay-Z eventually had to come out in Meek's defense. Drug and gun charges. Robert Rameek Williams, aka Meek Mills, was born on May 6, 1987 in Philadelphia. He lost his father at a young age. He got killed during an attempted robbery. His interest in hip-hop grew when they moved to South Philadelphia, where the hip-hop scene had just started gaining traction. When he moved there, he met his uncle named Grandmaster Nell, who was one of the pioneering DJs in the town. After meeting him and seeing his influence on rappers like Will Smith, he also decided to try his luck with it. He appeared for the first time in a rap battle when he was in his teens under the pseudonym of Meek Mills. He lost his first battle and left the stage crying. In the coming years, he kept on writing every thought in his notebook and went on to edit that. Later, he created the verses out of those random thoughts that the world listens to today. Meek tried his luck by creating a rap group by the name of the Bloodhounds that never really took off. When he was 18, he had gained some reputation for his good rapping skills in the underground community. This was his time to pursue it on a much larger scale, but sadly, his one mistake ended up costing him more than $30 million over the next 12 years. In 2007, he was coming from a corner store to his house when he saw the police were already standing there waiting for him. Later, he got to know that they had came for a drug bust because Mill had tried selling drugs to a police informant. He had a gun, and in a panic move, he decided to get rid of it. Throwing the gun was the worst crime he could have committed because the police saw him doing it and all hell broke loose. They used his head to open the door by banging on it. Upon searching his home, they couldn't find much to hold on to drug charges, so they charged him with assaulting the cops with a weapon. The police said in their statement that he pointed the gun at their faces, whereas Meek completely denied this allegation. Eventually, a year later, Judge Janice Brinkley sentenced him to nearly 2 years in prison, which was to be followed by 8 years of probation. Numerous parole violations. Meek Mill was released from prison in early 2009 by signing a 5-year parole agreement. For 2 years, he didn't get into trouble, and by 2012, he had become one of the most sought-after new MCs on the block. His songs were becoming popular, and his feature list was also growing. The industry was also taking notice of him, which meant he was bombarded with opportunities to make money. He kept on signing multiple deals which needed him to travel extensively. Williams didn't tell them about the parole as he didn't want to lose the money. In December 2012 came the result of his first probation violation when Judge Brinkley revoked his travel permit. After this, the next strike came when he went out again in May 2013. This time, the judge even ordered him to take etiquette classes. His crimes weren't dangerous, but due to his non-cooperative attitude, he was unable to get out of this web. He didn't report to the authorities about his travel plans and kept posting on social media. Every time he got a penalty for violating his probation, his fans also started abusing the police officers on social media. Earlier, Meek hid his legal troubles from the public eye, but then he saw its benefit. In June 2013, he again traveled without reporting, and this made the judge take strict action as she felt Mill was disrespecting the law. She asked to get him into the classes as soon as possible and gave the deadline of August. The classes were to tell him that if he reports about his whereabouts, it would benefit him, otherwise people can take advantage of his status. At the time, he was not ready to cooperate with even etiquette classes and complained about missing money. In July 2014, his probation was revoked and he was sentenced to prison for 6 months. He was released in December 2014. He kept a low profile for the next year, trying to stay out of trouble, but again got caught in 2015 December for violating the terms of his parole. His negligence and arrogant attitude didn't sit well with the judge, and this time she ordered him to not work until his arrest. He was sentenced to house arrest for 3 months. It began on March 1st, 2016. In addition to his house arrest, he was also given 6 more years of probation. In 2017, Meek got booked for a more serious charge. He had attacked 2 civilians in Missouri at an airport. This altercation got him more than 2 years in state prison. The same year, he also faced a civil suit where the family of Jaquan Graves sued them. Jaquan was attending his concert when he got killed by some anonymous people. His family said in the official statement that Meek and his people didn't do anything to get the thugs off the premises of his concert venue. There wasn't much reported after the initial allegation. It's suspected either they withdrew the lawsuit or got compensated outside of the court. A new trial. Around 2018, there was a whole campaign going on to release Meek from the charges that he had had since 2008. Due to the immense pressure of his fans and a solid case prepared by his lawyers, an alleged investigation was done. His lawyers claimed that Judge Janice Brinkley treated him unfairly. There were several proofs shown by his team which pointed in the same direction. One evidence was she came herself to see him during his community service hours, and one was she ordered him to give her a shout out in his song. The irregularities of the judge made the FBI suspicious of her agenda in Mill's case. The big blow came in 2018 when the officer who originally arrested Meek in 2018 was caught and declared a corrupt officer. As soon as the officer got caught, his lawyer submitted the application to acquit him from all the charges as his arrest was mishandled. In 2019, Superior Court of Pennsylvania granted his appeal and asked for a new trial that'll handle his case with no partiality. At this time, protests were being held by his fans who were asking to free him. Even a docuseries, Free Meek, was made for Amazon Prime. Roc Nation, Jay-Z, and Mill himself were the main producers behind it. Finally, after the effort of everyone from his team to the fans and his contemporaries, he got done with the case by pleading guilty to a misdemeanor. The judge concluded that he had already served 2 years in prison, which is more than enough for his charge, and now he's a free man. Since he got done with his trial, Meek has become a social activist. Earlier, he tried to keep his story hidden as he didn't want to be perceived as a criminal, but then he saw how much impact his story created. He famously said in an interview that he would have been behind bars if he didn't have such a high-profile network. He came clean about owning a gun, but also highlighted the fact that it was only for self-defense and he never actually used it, especially for threatening an officer. Feuds with other rappers. Meek doesn't know how to mince his words. As it can be guessed from his parole-violating history, he isn't good with following the rules either. Hip-hop is already famous as a community of hyper rappers who are ready to start a feud at any given time of the day. Meek's reputation does add fuel to this stereotype. Over the years, he's been involved in feuds with many of his fellow rappers. Drake. Meek accused Drake of not writing his own verses. He dissed him for taking credit for someone else's work. He even threw the name Quentin Miller out there, saying Miller is an Atlanta-based rapper who writes everything for Drake. His allegations even got a nod of approval from DJ Funkmaster Flex, who later even released multiple audio recordings of Quentin performing songs that were in Drake's forthcoming album. Meek was even upset that Drake never promoted any other rapper's work, especially his. He called him out for being jealous. While Meek started this feud by tweeting his thoughts, Drake replied like a rapper and released a diss track. He tackled Mill's weak point, and the obvious one was his unimpressive album sales. This started a whole nother can of worms where they kept on releasing diss tracks targeting one another. Meek was so ready to pounce, he once released a track within 15 minutes of Drake releasing his song. Mill even tried to hit below the belt by bragging that he is seeing Rihanna. This was a low blow because by now everyone knows Drake's eternal love for her. Their feud ended after Miller's release from prison and them featuring on a chart-topping song, Going Bad. 6ix9ine. Meek also had quite a public beef with Tekashi 6ix9ine. This started when 6ix9ine got arrested on many charges like racketeering, drugs, and gun violence. Mill made a video talking about the consequences of his actions. When Tekashi decided to cooperate with prosecutors, Meek again didn't let him go and said he will keep dissing him continuously. They came face to face in a parking lot of a club and shouted abuses at each other. Meek's guards came between them so there was no physical fight, but the video of their little interaction went viral on Twitter. That video also got featured in their diss tracks, and since then, there's been nothing but silence from both ends. Life after decade-long legal battles. Meek's loud mouth has always got him into trouble. First he got trapped in a case for decades, and then he kept on fighting with his contemporaries. But now, he seemed to learn it for good. It's commonly known that Jay-Z, an industry mogul, was heavily invested in his gun case because Meek was his signed artist, and he became one of the driving forces behind him being a free person today. To do for others what Jay-Z did for him, Meek has co-founded a reform alliance with Jay-Z. Their mission is to do something for people who are being targeted unjustly and are placed under parole or probation to keep them from living a free life. In 2019, he also announced the official launch of his record label, Dream Chasers Records, which he co-founded with Roc Nation. During his speech, he talked about the purpose of his label and specifically thanked Jay-Z and Roc Nation, who truly stood by him through the most challenging phase of his life. Creating a record label has always been the next step in my journey as a businessman, and I appreciate Roc Nation and Jay-Z's support on this new venture. I want to take my experiences in the music industry, use them to find young, hungry talent, and open doors for the next generation of artists. Meek was never about the criminal life. He never had any gang connections, but he somehow got involved in the whole ordeal. Today, he acknowledges his privilege and wants to use his power for good. Stay tuned and soon we'll be back with the more inside scoop.